Once upon a time, in a place that sits just behind your closed eyelids, there was a world called Driftwood. Driftwood is not like our noisy, busy world. In Driftwood, there are no alarm clocks, no car horns, and no shouting. It is a land built entirely of soft things. The ground is made of deep, plush moss that feels like warm velvet underfoot. The trees do not have scratchy bark, but trunks that feel like swede, with leaves as soft as owl feathers. The rivers do not rush. They flow with the consistency of warm honey, humming a low, gentle tune as they move toward the sea. In the very center of Driftwood stood the Spire of Silence. It was a magnificent tower carved from a single piece of shimmering moonstone, spiraling gently upward until its peak disappeared into the cotton candy clouds. The spire had a very important job. Inside the topmost room, there lived a little creature named Oliver. Oliver was a dream weaver. He was small, covered in soft, indigo fur, with large, round eyes that always looked a little sleepy. He wore a long robe woven from spider silk and starlight. Every night, as the sun sets in your world, Oliver would go to work. His job was to operate the great loom of sound. This was a massive, beautiful machine made of polished driftwood and golden strings. Oliver would sit at the loom, and with his small paws, he would weave together the sounds of the universe into the great universal lullaby. He would take the sound of wind sighing through pine needles. He would take the sound of distant ocean waves rolling onto a sandy shore. He would take the hum of a contented cat, the rhythm of soft rain on a window pane, and the gentle creak of an old rocking chair. He wove them all together into a thick, warm blanket of sound that drifted out from the spire, rolling over the hills of Driftwood, crossing the boundary of dreams, and settling over your world to help everyone sleep. But tonight, something was wrong. Oliver sat at his loom, ready to begin his work. The moonstone walls of his room usually glowed with a soft, pulsing light, keeping time with the universe's heartbeat. But tonight, the light was dim and flickering. The air in the spire was usually filled with a gentle hum, like a seashell held to your ear. But tonight, it was just silent. Not a peaceful silence. An empty silence. Oliver reached out with a furry paw and gently plucked one of the golden strings of the great loom. Usually, it would produce a deep, resonant cello note that vibrated right through his tummy. Tonight, it just made a tiny, dull plink. Oliver frowned a very sleepy frown. He tried another string. Clink. The great universal lullaby was broken. The sounds that made it up, the whispers, the hums, the rhythms, had vanished from driftwood. And without the lullaby, the sleep magic wouldn't work. Oliver knew what he had to do. He picked up his little satchel, made of woven moonbeams, and put on his traveling slippers, which were padded with the fluff of dandelions. "I must go find the lost sounds," Oliver whispered to the empty room. "I must gather the pieces of the lullaby, one by one, and bring them home." He stepped out of the Spire of Silence and into the cool, indigo twilight of driftwood. The journey would be long, and he was already very tired, but the world needed its sleep. Oliver walked slowly away from the spire. His first destination was the whispering woods of Wisteria. Usually, as you approach these woods, you can hear them before you see them. They are the source of the world's most comforting, shushing sounds. The millions of purple leaves on the wisteria trees usually rub together in the breeze, creating a sound like a mother soothing a baby. Shh, shh, shh. But tonight, as Oliver's soft slippers padded on the mossy path leading into the trees, there was no shushing. The glowing purple leaves hung perfectly still, heavy and silent. The air was thick and still. Oliver walked deeper into the woods. The light here was dim, coming only from the glowing mushrooms that lined the path like little sleepy lamps. The air smelled like lavender and old books, a very sleepy smell. He walked for what felt like a very long time, his little legs moving slowly, rhythmically. Left foot, right foot. Soft step, soft step. Finally, he reached the center of the woods, where the grandfather wisteria tree stood. This tree was impossibly old. Its trunk so wide it would take 100 dream weavers holding hands to circle it. Its bark was thick and wrinkled like a cozy blanket. Grandfather Wisteria, Oliver whispered into the stillness. His voice was swallowed up by the quiet. He waited. He took a deep, slow breath, smelling the lavender air. Slowly, very slowly, a large, knotty eye on the trunk of the tree opened. It was an eye the color of warm tea. Who disturbs the quiet? The tree rumbled. Its voice was incredibly deep and slow, like two heavy stones grinding together underwater. It is Oliver, the dream weaver, Oliver replied softly. Grandfather, where is the whisper? The great loom is silent. The world cannot sleep without your shh. The grandfather tree sighed, a sound that shook the ground very gently. We are too tired, little weaver, the tree groaned slowly. The breeze has gone to sleep. Without the breeze, we cannot rustle. We cannot shh. Oliver nodded understandingly. Everything was just too tired to make the sleep sounds. May I try to wake the leaves, just a little? Oliver asked. The tree slowly closed its tea-colored eye. You may try. Oliver stepped closer to the massive trunk. He reached into his moonbeam satchel and pulled out a tiny, delicate instrument. It looked like a flute carved from a single piece of clear ice. It was a breeze caller. Oliver put the chilly flute to his lips and blew the gentlest breath he could manage. Whew! The sound was barely there. It was lower than a whisper, softer than a sigh. He blew again, a little longer this time. Whew! A tiny ripple passed through the air. One purple leaf high above Oliver's head twitched. Then another. Oliver played a slow, rolling scale on the flute. The notes were deep and airy. As he played, a gentle current of air began to swirl around the clearing. It wasn't a cold wind. It was a warm, heavy breeze, like the exhale of a sleeping giant. The breeze lifted the heavy purple leaves. They began to brush against each other. Rustle, shh, rustle, shh. It started quietly, just a few leaves. Then, the sound spread to the branches of the grandfather tree, and then out to the surrounding trees. The sound grew thicker, richer. It was the sound of ultimate comfort, the sound that tells you everything is okay. Shh. 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 Oliver stopped playing, but the sound continued. The woods were breathing again. He opened his satchel wide. The sound seemed to know what to do. A swirling eddy of the shh sound, visible as a faint purple mist, drifted down from the trees and curled itself up inside Oliver's bag. He had the first piece of the lullaby. Thank you, drifted the sleepy voice of the grandfather tree. Sleep well, Oliver whispered back. He turned and slowly began the long walk out of the woods, the comforting shush following him as he went. Leaving the soft ground of the woods behind, Oliver's journey took him downward. He followed a winding path that led into the mouth of a mountain, leading to the crystal caves of resonance. These caves were responsible for the deep, echoing hum that forms the bass note of the great lullaby. Usually, water drips from the stalactites high above, hitting the crystal pools below. The sound becomes trapped inside the hollow crystals, bouncing back and forth, creating a long, sustaining hum that vibrates deep in your chest. Oliver entered the cave. The air became cooler, smelling of damp earth and clean stone. The light changed from the purple glow of the woods to the cool blue and white radiance of the giant crystals that jutted out from the walls and ceiling. He stopped and listened. Drip. He waited. There was no echo. The sound just hit the floor and died instantly. Drip. Silence. The cave felt flat and empty. The crystals, usually vibrant with trapped sound, looked dull, their inner light pulsing weakly. Oliver walked deeper into the cave, his dandelion slippers making no noise on the smooth stone floor. He reached the edge of the Great Mirror Lake. A vast underground pool of water so still it looked like solid glass. In the center of the lake stood the largest crystal of all, the Mother Quartz. It was the size of a small house, a towering pillar of white stone. Oliver needed to wake up the echo. He knew that the crystals needed a vibration to start humming again. They were too tired to start on their own. He walked along the edge of the lake until he found a small, round pebble made of smooth sapphire. He picked it up. It was cool and heavy in his small paw. He looked across the dark, still water at the Mother Quartz. He needed perfect aim. Oliver pulled his arm back slowly. He took a deep breath, focused on the center of the giant crystal, and threw the sapphire pebble. It sailed through the cool cave air in a silent arc. Tink. The pebble struck the Mother Quartz dead center. It was a tiny, sharp sound. Then, the magic happened. The sound didn't die. The Mother Quartz caught the tiny tink. The light inside the giant crystal flared up, bright white for a second. Then, the crystal sang it back, but lower, deeper. Whom, mmmmmmmm. The sound traveled across the water, hitting the crystals on the far wall. They lit up in blue and violet and sang the note back. Whom, mmmmmm. Now the sound was bouncing back and forth across the lake, growing deeper and richer with every pass. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a thick layer of sound that filled the air. A vibration you could feel in your bones. It was the sound of deep, dreamless sleep. The water in the lake began to tremble slightly with the vibration, creating tiny, perfect ripples that spread slowly outward. Other drops of water fell from the ceiling. Drip. Drip. The echo was back. The cave was resonating. Oliver opened his moonbeam satchel again. The deep, rolling hum seemed to gather itself from the air, swirling like thick blue smoke, and poured itself into the bag next to the purple whisper of the woods. Oliver felt heavy. The sound was powerful and made his eyelids droop. He yawned, a wide, sleepy yawn that showed his little pink tongue. Two pieces, he murmured to himself, his voice sounding distant in the echoing cave. Now for the softness. He turned slowly and began the long, steady climb back up toward the surface of driftwood. Oliver emerged from the cool caves back into the twilight. His next journey was long. Across flat lands, toward the horizon where the ground seemed to merge with the sky. He was heading to the cloud plains of cotton. This was the land responsible for the sensation of softness in the lullaby. It wasn't a specific note, but a texture. The feeling of sinking into a perfect mattress, pulling a heavy comforter up to your chin, and closing your eyes. As Oliver stepped onto the plains, he immediately sank up to his knees in the ground. It wasn't snow. It was warm, fluffy material, like millions of dandelion seeds pressed together. Walking here was very slow and very difficult, but it was also incredibly relaxing. Every step was a soft poof. If he fell over, he would just bounce gently. The sound he was looking for here was the muffle. It is the sound of the world going away when you put your head on the pillow. It's the absence of sharp noises. But the plains were too quiet today. The fluff wasn't lofty enough. It lay flat and dense. Oliver waded through the cotton fluff until he saw a herd of creatures grazing ahead. They were the woolly wanderers. They looked like very round, very fluffy sheep, but they floated just an inch above the ground. And their wool was made of actual cloud vapor. They were usually slowly drifting around, bumping into each other with soft thump sounds, keeping the air moving and the fluff lofty. Today, they were all lying down, half buried in the cotton ground, fast asleep. "Excuse me," Oliver whispered to the nearest wanderer. It didn't move. It just let out a soft, whistling snore. Oliver knew he couldn't wake them up. They were deep in the dream world. He had to create the loft himself. He needed to make the biggest, softest impact he could. Oliver found a particularly high mound of cotton fluff. He slowly climbed to the top of it, sinking in with every step. When he reached the peak, he looked down at a valley of pure white softness below. He took a deep breath, curled his little indigo body into a tight ball, and rolled forward. He tumbled down the hill of cotton. Down, down, down he rolled, gathering speed silently. At the bottom, he hit the main valley floor with a magnificent, silent impact. Poof! It wasn't a loud sound. It was a massive displacement of air. A huge wave of fluff billowed upwards in slow motion, like a mushroom cloud of feathers. The wave traveled outward across the plains. As it hit the sleeping woolly wanderers, it gently lifted them up, fluffing their cloud wool. They murmured sleepily and drifted a few inches higher, bumping into each other softly. Thump, poof, thump. The air became thick with softness. The sharp edges of the world blurred. The muffled quality returned to the atmosphere. It felt like being wrapped in a dozen warm blankets. Oliver lay flat on his back in the cotton crater he had made, staring up at the pastel sky. He felt so incredibly comfortable. He almost fell asleep right there. His eyes closed, and his breathing slowed down to match the slow drift of the clouds. He had to force himself to open his eyes. "Not yet, Oliver," he whispered. "Almost done." He sat up and opened his satchel. The essence of the muffled softness, a thick, creamy white vapor, drifted into the bag, settling on top of the hum and the whisper. He had 3 pieces. Only one remained. Oliver's final journey was to the edge of driftwood, where the land met the endless sea of starlight. This ocean was the source of the rhythm of the lullaby. The slow, steady inhalation and exhalation of the universe. Oliver stood on the shore, which was made of fine, silver sand that felt like warm sugar. He looked out at the dark, glittering water. Usually, the ocean breathed. The waves would roll in, pause, and roll back out, keeping perfect time. In and out. In and out. But tonight, the Ocean of Starlight was flat calm. The water was a perfect mirror of the starry sky above, so still that you couldn't tell where the water ended and the sky began. It was beautiful, but it was too still. There was no rhythm to rock the world to sleep. Oliver needed to find the tide caller. He walked along the silver beach until he found a small boat carved from a dark, curved piece of driftwood. He pushed it into the thick, inky water and climbed inside. There were no oars. The boat moved by thought. "Take me to the deep," Oliver thought sluggishly. The boat glided silently across the black mirror of the water, heading toward the horizon where the giant crescent moon touched the sea. He traveled for a long time, the only movement in a frozen universe of stars. Finally, ahead of him, the water began to bulge upward. A massive, smooth shape rose slowly from the depths. It was the great slumber whale. It was impossibly big, its skin the color of the midnight sky, speckled with constellations that glowed softly. The whale surfaced slowly, water cascading off its back without a sound. It opened a large, calm eye and looked at Oliver's tiny boat. It opened its mouth to speak, but no sound came out. It was too wary to find its voice. It just let out a long, silent sigh that smelled of salt and ancient stardust. "Great whale," Oliver whispered to the water. "The rhythm is lost. The ocean has forgotten how to breathe." The whale looked at Oliver sadly. It slowly lifted its massive tail out of the water. It held it there, poised against the stars. It was trying to start the wave, but it didn't have the energy to bring its tail down. Oliver knew what he had to do. He had to share the energy he had gathered. He opened his moonbeam satchel wide. The 3 sounds he had collected swirled inside. The purple whisper, the blue hum, the white softness. "Take this," Oliver whispered. He reached into the bag and scooped up a handful of the swirling sound magic. He threw it toward the great whale. The magic hit the whale's skin and absorbed into it like water into a sponge. The constellations on the whale's skin glowed brighter. The whale shuddered, a slow ripple running down its massive flank. Slowly, with immense power and grace, the great tail began to descend. Down, down, down. It seemed to take forever. Crash. SSSSS, HHH. The tail struck the water. It wasn't a violent crash, but a deep, booming push. A massive, slow wave began to roll outward from the whale, traveling across the starlit sea toward the distant shore. The whale inhaled slowly, a sound like a vast wind tunnel. HHOOOOOOOOMMMMMMM. And then exhaled. WWWAAAAASSSSHH. Another wave began. The rhythm had returned. The ocean was breathing again. Oliver sat in his little boat, rocking gently up and down on the newly formed swells. Up and down. Up and down. He opened his satchel one last time. The sound of the rhythmic waves, a shimmering silver vapor, drifted into the bag, completing the collection. His task was done. He was so tired his bones felt like melted wax. He leaned his head against the side of the boat and let the rhythm of the star ocean carry him back toward the shore, back toward the spire. Oliver made it back to the Spire of Silence. He didn't remember the walk back from the beach. He must have slumbered while walking. He climbed the winding stairs to his room, his feet feeling heavier with every step. The room was still dark and silent. The great loom waited. Oliver stood before the loom. He opened his satchel and turned it upside down. The four sounds poured out. They didn't fall to the floor. They floated in the air, swirling around each other. The purple whisper mixed with the blue hum, the white softness blended with the silver rhythm. They spiraled together, faster and faster, until they formed a single, glowing golden orb of pure sound. Oliver took the golden orb in his paws. It was warm. He gently pressed it into the heart of the great loom. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a single golden string on the loom began to vibrate. It hummed a low, perfect note. Then another string joined in. Then another. The light in the spire flared up, warm and golden, pulsing steadily. The great universal lullaby began to play. It was the most beautiful sound in existence. It was the sound of safety, of warmth, of heavy eyelids and peaceful dreams. The sound washed over Oliver. He smiled a sleepy smile. He climbed up onto his own little bed, which was made of piled-up moonbeams and dandelion fluff. He pulled a blanket woven of twilight sky up to his chin. The lullaby drifted out of the spire windows, rolling over the whispering woods, filling the crystal caves, settling over the cotton plains, and moving across the ocean of starlight. It crossed the boundary of dreams and drifted down into your room, right now. It is the sound you hear when everything else goes quiet. It is the sound that is telling you it is time to let go. Oliver closed his large, round eyes. His breathing slowed down. In and out. "Good night, world," he whispered. And within seconds, the weaver of dreams was fast asleep. And now, it is your turn. Good night.